So I would love for you, Marlo, to weigh in on some of your observations and experiences in terms of the values and how we're sort of seen in society across the generations, and whether you think this is playing a role in this question, right? Are Black families pushing our children out too soon?
I think it's interesting because I think, I'm a Gen Xer, right? We were the latchkey kids. We were going home, don't answer my phone, don't open my door. You go home, you do your homework, you make those Pop Tarts. If there's food on the stove, you warm it. We had our regimented, and it doesn't matter, right? Like as a professional, I talk to my colleagues who are non-Black. They had those same rules in place, right? All the kids who were raised in that particular generation were kind of moving the same way as our parents navigated a new world, right? A post industrial age world, right? So I think that we kind of look back at the boomers and we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to work myself like that. But I know the value and understand the value of work. And I think that when we had kids, we kind of tried to make a little bit of an easier life, tried to be there a little more present for our kids. And I think that that has kind of, I won't say soft, because I don't think that my kids are soft. I see my kids as very strong, independent young people. But they're not built like my brother and I, like they're built differently than we were built. And I think that it's okay. I think that understanding gets you past anything, right? I understand how my ex and I raised our kids, and the things that informed their world versus the things that informed our world. And I just try to be adaptive as a parent. I try to make sure that I am giving them what they need in the time that they need it. Me looking back at what it was like for me in 1984 and 1989, it's counterproductive to the world that they have right now. My kids never had to stop to go look up something in the encyclopedia. I used to sit there with all the encyclopedias. I think Jay said it last week. I used to love to go to my grandparents' house because they had so many sets, right? You could look in the medical encyclopedia, you could look in the regular, they had pictures, everything. My kids never had that experience. Everything is in their pockets. And because everything is in their pockets, I think a greater conversation is always needed to make sure that they understand the value of the access that they have, and that they don't get entitled, and then melt down when their entitlements aren't met. So I think, I'm always going to push understanding across generations. I have three little grandchildren, and they're totally different from the kids that I raised, right? So it's always changing. It's always going to look different. And I think that the disadvantage is when we try to hold on to traditions that don't really serve this time and era. I think that that is setting children up for failure for sure.
Thank you so much for that, Marlo. Linda E., what do you think about especially that last point, us sort of deviating from traditions that may no longer be serving us in this day and age?
I think it is important to grow with the generation, right? Every generation has its new traditions, has its new things that it needs to overcome. And I find it interesting when people say that, because I'm a millennial, right? And we are the last of the kind of bridging generation that know what it's like to not have the internet, but also know how to use the internet, right? And I always find it interesting when people say things about Gen Z and how they are entitled. And yeah, definitely, they literally, if they want something, they got it at the palm of their hands. But I also find Gen Zs are the ones who are, making money off TikTok, being influencers, opening t-shirt jobs, I find it's so I think it's such a very nuanced conversation, because I feel like Gen Z are really breaking some generational curses. So the thing about traditions is that they do adapt. That's how traditions work. It's not, a tradition can't be set in stone forever, because times really do change. So we do have to move with those times. And I think it's important to, as a parent, when I will be a parent, is to parent based on the time that we are living in. And yes, my culture, my husband is also Nigerian. Our culture is very important to us, and we'll definitely, we're not gonna, in the UK, I know you guys hear this all the time, with black people, we will always say, oh, our culture is Nigerian or Congolese or Sierra Leonean. We're not necessarily going to just say black British. We will say where our ancestors came from. So my children will know that their parents and their grandparents and blah, 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 blah were Nigerian. But will they necessarily be raised the same way me and my siblings were? I'm not too sure. My parents did an amazing job. All four of us are all have degrees. All four of us are doing well in our professions by the grace of God. But you know, going back to the original video, that whole 3-month thing, I don't believe in. But having that conversation and saying, okay, look, kids, we expect you guys by the age of 21, 22, 23, 25, this is what you need to be working towards. I think that's healthy based on the times that we're in. But to kind of drop it and give it as an ultimatum,